you known about Andrew and Epstein?
The morning air in Clitheroe carried that familiar sense of ceremony that follows every royal walkabout: polished shoes on cobblestones, carefully arranged smiles, and a tightly controlled schedule designed to project stability. King Charles arrived to meet farmers and small business owners, a visit meant to spotlight rural initiatives and present the image of a monarch in touch with everyday people. Yet almost immediately, the carefully managed atmosphere cracked. From behind the crowd, a voice rose above the pleasantries, cutting through the choreography of handshakes and photo opportunities with a blunt question about Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. It wasn't the kind of interruption palace aides plan for. It wasn't scripted, wasn't filtered, and most importantly, it wasn't avoidable. "How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein?" the man called out. The question lingered in the air longer than anyone wanted it to. For a split second, the royal bubble felt smaller, thinner. It was the sort of moment that reminds everyone watching that the monarchy doesn't exist in isolation. It exists in public memory, and the public has questions. Instead of addressing the concern, Charles offered nothing. No acknowledgement, no reassurance, no statement of transparency, just silence. The crowd's reaction was swift. Loyalists shouted for the man to be removed, drowning out the discomfort with chants of "Shut up!" Applause followed when he was escorted away, as though pushing the question aside somehow erased it. But applause doesn't erase reality, it only masks it. That scene told a deeper story than the palace likely intended. Because when uncomfortable truths are brushed away rather than faced, it sends a message. And that message isn't strength, it's avoidance. Moments like these highlight a growing contrast within the royal family. On one side, there's the old guard, rigid, protective, allergic to transparency. On the other, there are figures like Prince Harry and Meghan, who, whatever one's opinion of their choices, have consistently chosen openness over silence. They have spoken when things were uncomfortable. They have addressed pain rather than pretending it didn't exist, and that difference is becoming harder to ignore. While Charles continued shaking hands and posing with representatives from local groups, the image felt rehearsed. He met field nurses, smiled for photographs, and admired shire horses at Samlesbury Hall. All perfectly pleasant engagements, all very traditional. But increasingly, these events feel like theatre. The kind of royal performance that looks good in headlines, yet avoids the heavier questions weighing on the institution. Because what people want today isn't just ribbon-cutting ceremonies. They want accountability, they want authenticity, they want leaders who don't duck behind protocol. That's where Harry and Meghan's approach resonates so strongly with many people around the world. For years, Harry has spoken about confronting hard truths head-on. Whether it was his mental health struggles, the trauma of losing his mother, or the pressures of life inside the palace machine, he chose candour over comfort. That's not weakness, that's courage. It's easier to hide behind tradition. It's harder to be honest. Meghan has done the same. She stepped into one of the most scrutinised families on earth and still refused to be silenced. She talked openly about isolation, about the lack of support she felt, about the toll it took. In a system that often expects women to smile quietly and endure, she refused to shrink herself. That kind of strength unsettles institutions built on quiet compliance. And perhaps that's why their path diverged so sharply from Charles's version of monarchy. Because while Charles represents preservation at all costs, Harry and Meghan represent evolution. Think about it. When faced with criticism or controversy, Harry and Meghan communicate. They release statements, give interviews, create projects, and tell their own story. They don't rely on courtiers to spin narratives behind closed doors. They speak directly to people. Whether through documentaries, podcasts, or charitable initiatives, they engage in a modern language that feels human, not hierarchical. Charles, meanwhile, often seems locked in another era, one where silence is strategy, and the public is expected to accept it without question. But that strategy doesn't work the way it once did. Today's audiences are informed. They research. They talk online. They expect answers. And when they don't get them, trust erodes. That heckler in Clitheroe wasn't just one voice. He represented a broader frustration, the sense that some issues are never truly addressed, only buried under ceremony. The Epstein connection surrounding Prince Andrew isn't a trivial footnote. It's a serious stain on the royal family's reputation. And yet Charles's refusal to comment, to clarify, or to reassure felt like a missed opportunity to demonstrate leadership. A leader doesn't simply walk past the hard questions. A leader faces them. Harry has shown repeatedly that he understands that responsibility. When he talks about accountability, it's not theoretical. It's personal. He has admitted mistakes. He has acknowledged his own growth. That kind of self-reflection is rare in institutions built on infallibility. And it's precisely why so many younger people relate to him. Meghan, too, channels her energy into tangible work supporting women's empowerment, mental health initiatives, and community-building efforts. Her focus has always been outward, practical, and compassionate. It's not about optics, it's about impact. Compare that with Charles's day of engagements. Horses, handshakes, photo ops, pleasant? Yes, transformative? Not exactly. There's nothing wrong with tradition, but tradition without accountability feels hollow. And the contrast becomes sharper every time the monarchy faces public scrutiny. Charles's reign was supposed to signal renewal, a modern king for a modern Britain. Yet moments like the Clitheroe confrontation suggest a system still clinging tightly to old habits. Protect the image, avoid the question, move on quickly. That approach may preserve dignity in the short term, but it chips away at credibility in the long run. Harry and Meghan took a different route entirely. They stepped away rather than pretend everything was fine. They chose mental health over protocol, family safety over public expectations, truth over tradition. That wasn't the easy option. It came with backlash, criticism, and endless headlines. But they stood firm. There's something deeply admirable about that kind of resolve. It takes strength to leave a powerful institution. It takes even more strength to build a new life from scratch while the world watches. And yet they've done exactly that, creating projects, supporting causes, and shaping a legacy that feels rooted in service rather than ceremony. Meanwhile, Charles remains caught in a cycle of carefully curated appearances that rarely address the deeper concerns people actually have. The Clitheroe incident wasn't just a random disruption. It was symbolic. A reminder that questions don't disappear simply because they're inconvenient. If anything, ignoring them only amplifies them. Imagine how different the moment could have been if Charles had paused, acknowledged the concern, and promised transparency. Even a simple statement about accountability or cooperation would have gone a long way. Instead, silence created a vacuum, and vacuums breed skepticism. Harry has never been afraid of that kind of honesty. He's spoken about therapy, trauma, and the need for institutional reform. Those conversations might feel uncomfortable, but they're real. They resonate. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with humanity. And that's ultimately why Harry and Meghan continue to capture so much global support. They feel relatable. They feel sincere. They feel like people trying to make a difference rather than preserve a pedestal. Charles, for all his years of preparation, sometimes feels distant, insulated by tradition, guarded by protocol, and hesitant to step into uncomfortable territory. In today's world, distance doesn't inspire loyalty. Connection does. So, while the king carried on with his schedule, smiling beside horses, touring historic halls, greeting carefully selected guests, the unanswered question still lingered. Not just about Andrew, but about the monarchy's willingness to confront reality. And in that contrast, Harry and Meghan's approach shines brighter. They've built a model of public life based on empathy, advocacy, and openness. They've shown that service doesn't require a throne, it requires heart. They've proven that stepping away from tradition can sometimes be the most courageous act of all. As the royal landscape continues to evolve, one thing feels increasingly clear. The future belongs to authenticity. And in that future, voices like Harry and Meghan's, compassionate, honest and unafraid, feel far more aligned with what people actually want from leadership than the old reflex of silence and ceremony. Because at the end of the day, crowns may command attention, but truth commands respect.